I'm Trevor, 28 years old, and I'd been dating Cassandra for 3 years when this all went down. We got a place together around a year and a half in, right after she got laid off from her job at some boutique advertising agency. I'm a software engineer pulling in solid money at a tech firm downtown, so when she suggested moving in together to save costs, it seemed like the natural next step. Cassandra had been freelancing as a graphic designer since losing her job, but the work came in waves, sometimes feast, mostly famine. Here's the thing about how we started out, though. When Cassandra and I first got together, she was completely self-sufficient. Had her own place, handled her own bills, never once asked me for help with anything financial. That independence was honestly what drew me to her in the first place. She seemed like she had everything figured out, you know? But after moving in, things shifted gradually, like watching ice melt. At first, she contributed her share from savings she'd built up. Then the freelance gigs started drying up right around when the pandemic hit everyone hard. I told her to relax, that I could handle expenses temporarily while she got her footing back. What I thought would last a few months became our permanent arrangement. I ended up covering literally everything. Rent, utilities, food, car insurance for both vehicles, even her cell phone bill got rolled into my family plan because it saved money. I took care of household repairs, did most of the cleaning, managed our entire social calendar. When we grabbed dinner with friends, my card came out. When we took vacations, I booked and paid for flights, hotels, meals, all of it. Cassandra seemed appreciative initially. She'd thank me constantly and promised things would balance out once her career momentum picked back up. But as time dragged on, those promises stopped coming. She started treating this arrangement like it was just how our relationship functioned naturally. She'd ask me to make reservations for her girls' nights out. She expected me to chauffeur her around when her car acted up. She'd commit us to plans without checking with me first, just assuming I'd handle the logistics and foot the bill. Our love life stayed solid, though. We were sleeping together regularly. She seemed content, told me she loved me. We'd curl up together watching television. Everything looked perfectly normal from an outside perspective. Her friends approved of me. My friends liked her. We even talked about upgrading to a bigger apartment next year and adopting a dog together. Then, 3 weeks ago, we're sitting on the couch watching some house-flipping reality show. I'm getting ready for bed because I had an early morning meeting scheduled. I lean over to kiss her goodnight like always. She pulls away and gives me this weird look I'd never seen before. She grabs the remote, mutes the television, and turns to face me head on. She says she needs to tell me something important. The air in the room suddenly feels heavy, like right before a thunderstorm. She explains that she likes me as a person and enjoys our living situation, but she's not in love with me anymore. Hasn't been for months, maybe longer. She wants to be honest because she respects me too much to keep faking it. The words hit me like a truck, but I kept my face neutral. I asked what she wants to do about us, about the apartment, about everything. She says she hopes we can keep living together as friends, says we function well as roommates, and there's no reason to ruin a good thing. She values our friendship and doesn't want to complicate it by making dramatic changes. She's talking about this like she's discussing a change in our Netflix subscription, not the end of our 3-year relationship. I tell her I need time to process this. I head to the bedroom and lie there staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through 3 years of memories, trying to figure out when exactly she stopped loving me. About 20 minutes later, my phone starts lighting up with notifications. Cassandra's in a group chat with her 3 best friends, and I have access to it because we sometimes use the shared tablet to message when our phones die. The tablet is sitting on my nightstand, and I watch her telling them about the conversation we literally just had. I see the messages rolling in. Her friends are praising her for being so brave and mature with her honesty. They're saying it shows how much she cares about me, that she didn't want to hurt me by lying. They're going on about how most people stay in relationships for convenience, but it takes real courage to have difficult conversations like this. One of them even says she's being so emotionally intelligent about the whole thing. That's when it clicked for me. Cassandra wasn't being brave or honest. She was being strategic. She'd figured out how to keep every single benefit of our relationship without any of the emotional obligations that come with actually loving someone. She wanted to keep living in the apartment I paid for. She wanted to maintain the financial security I provided. She wanted the emotional support and companionship. She just didn't want to feel guilty anymore about not loving me back. The next morning, I tell her I'm completely fine with the roommate arrangement. She looks relieved and hugs me tight, says she's so glad I understand and this will be better for both of us long term. That's when I decided to become the absolute perfect roommate. Not boyfriend who happens to live with you, actual roommate. I stopped making her coffee in the mornings. I'd always brewed a full carafe and set her mug out next to it with exactly the amount of cream she liked already measured out. Now I make exactly 1 cup in my travel mug and head out. The first morning I did this, she came into the kitchen expecting her usual setup and found nothing. She looked confused, then annoyed, but didn't say anything. I stopped doing her laundry. Used to toss her clothes in with mine whenever I ran a load. Now I wash exclusively my own stuff. Her laundry basket in the bathroom started overflowing after about a week and a half. She eventually had to figure out how to use the washing machine herself, something I realized she hadn't done in over a year. I stopped buying her favorite foods during grocery runs. Used to grab that specific yogurt brand she loves and the expensive granola she eats every morning. Now I buy precisely what I need for myself, nothing extra. I watched her open the refrigerator one morning, looking for her yogurt, and saw the disappointment on her face when she realized I hadn't bought any. When she asked me to book a reservation for her and her girlfriends last week, I told her I was busy that evening. Suggested she call the restaurant directly since they usually have openings if you call ahead. When her car started making that grinding noise again, she mentioned it while I was working on my laptop. I said that sounded frustrating and suggested she get quotes from a few mechanics in the area. Told her Yelp usually has solid reviews for local auto shops. She keeps giving me these looks like she's waiting for me to do something. She leaves dishes piled in the sink longer than normal, probably expecting me to wash them like before. I just wash my own dishes and leave hers sitting there. She's been playing melancholy music in the living room and sighing dramatically when I'm nearby. Yesterday she asked if I wanted to watch a movie together, and I said I was planning to hit the gym. I can see her getting more frustrated daily, but I genuinely don't understand why. I'm giving her exactly what she requested. We're roommates now. I treat her the same way I'd treat any roommate, with basic courtesy and respect, but without all the extras that come from being in love with someone. Her phone service got disconnected yesterday because I removed my payment method from her line on the family plan. She came to me panicking, asking what happened. I explained that since we're not really family anymore, it made sense for her to have her own phone plan. Offered to help her set up service with any carrier she wanted. I'm not trying to be cruel or get revenge here. I'm just being logical. She made it crystal clear our romantic relationship was over, so I'm adjusting my behavior to match that reality. I don't do extra things for roommates that I'd only do for someone I'm in love with. The lease on our apartment expires in 2 months, and I'm not planning to renew. I've been browsing one-bedroom places closer to my office. Cassandra doesn't know yet, because she hasn't asked, and roommates don't typically discuss their long-term housing plans unless it directly impacts the other person. Am I handling this wrong? Should I be doing more to try to work things out? I feel like I'm being reasonable here, but maybe I'm missing something. So I posted that a while back and got tons of responses asking for updates. Here's what's happened since. Things have gotten way more interesting. Cassandra's frustration has morphed into something closer to full-blown panic, and I think reality is finally hitting her about what she actually asked for. Let me start with her birthday last week. Cassandra turned 27 on Tuesday. In previous years, I'd planned something special for her birthday. 2 years back, I surprised her with a weekend getaway to wine country. Last year, I organized a dinner party with all her friends at this expensive Italian restaurant she'd been wanting to try. I'd typically spend weeks planning everything, making reservations, coordinating with her friends, handling every detail. This year, I wished her happy birthday in the morning and asked if she had fun plans for the day. She looked at me like I'd grown a second head. She said she thought we might do something together to celebrate. I said that sounded nice and asked what she had in mind. She said she hadn't made specific plans because she assumed I'd handle it like always. I reminded her that planning birthday celebrations is typically something boyfriends do for girlfriends, or something people do for themselves. Since we're roommates now, I figured she'd want to celebrate with her actual friends rather than her roommate. She stared at me for a long moment, then said she'd figure something out. She spent most of the day frantically texting people, trying to organize something last minute. Most of her friends were busy because it was a Tuesday night and she hadn't given them advance notice. She ended up ordering Chinese takeout and eating it alone while watching Netflix. I was in the office working on a project due the next morning. The financial reality has been hitting her way harder than I expected. Besides the phone bill situation, there have been several other wake-up calls. Her car registration expired last month. I'd always handled that for both of us because I'm organized about paperwork and deadlines. She didn't realize it was her responsibility now until she got pulled over for expired tags. The ticket was $250 plus late fees for the registration renewal. Our car insurance came up for renewal, and I removed her from my policy. She had to get her own insurance, which cost significantly more than the bundled discount rate she was getting on my plan. She called me at work asking why her insurance card wasn't working when she tried to show it to the cop during the traffic stop. She's been asking me to drive her places because her car is still making noise and she's nervous about driving it. Last Saturday, she asked me to take her to Target because she needed to pick up some things and didn't trust her car for the 20-minute drive. I told her I had plans to go hiking with my buddy Derek, but I could drop her off at Target on my way if she wanted. She asked how she was supposed to get home. I suggested she could call an Uber or take the bus. The bus stop is right outside Target and our apartment is on the direct route. She ended up taking the bus home, which took over an hour because she had to wait 30 minutes for the next bus and then make 2 transfers. She was carrying heavy bags and looked completely exhausted when she got back. I think she's starting to realize how much I was handling behind the scenes. I used to take care of all the little things that make life run smoothly. Now she has to figure out everything herself, and she's discovering that being an adult requires way more planning and money than she remembered. Her freelance work has picked up slightly, but not nearly enough to cover all her new expenses. She got a small project designing a logo for a local restaurant, which paid $800. But between her new phone bill, car insurance, the traffic ticket, and having to buy her own groceries, that money evaporated instantly. She's been eating a lot of pasta and canned soup lately because those are the cheapest options she can find. Meanwhile, I continue buying my normal groceries, including fresh vegetables, quality meat, and the organic products I prefer. I keep everything on my designated shelves in the refrigerator and pantry. I even labeled my shelves with my name, just to be clear about boundaries. Last weekend, she asked if she could borrow some of my food because she was running low on groceries and wouldn't get paid for her latest project until the following week. I told her she was welcome to anything in the shared sections like salt, pepper, and basic condiments, but the rest was my personal food. She looked at the fresh salmon I just bought for dinner that night, and I could see the frustration in her eyes. She asked if I could spot her some money for groceries, and she'd pay me back when her client paid her. I explained that lending money to roommates can make things awkward, especially when there's no clear timeline for repayment. I've had roommates in college who borrowed money and never paid it back, and I wasn't going to repeat that mistake. I suggested she could ask her friends or family for help, or maybe pick up some extra freelance work. She muttered something under her breath and walked away. That night I cooked the salmon with roasted vegetables and ate dinner at the kitchen table while she heated up ramen in her room. The contrast wasn't lost on either of us. The social dynamics have been interesting too. Cassandra's friends have stopped coming over as much as they used to. I think they feel awkward around me, now that they know we're not actually dating anymore. When they do come over, they whisper constantly and keep glancing at me like they're trying to read my mind. 2 of her friends, Lauren and Stephanie, came over last Thursday night. They were clearly there to provide emotional support and probably to discuss me. I said hello when they arrived, offered them drinks like a polite roommate would, then went to my office to work. I could hear them talking quietly in the living room for about 2 hours. When they were leaving, Lauren stopped by my office door and asked if she could talk to me for a minute. She said Cassandra was going through a hard time and asked if there was any way we could work things out. She said Cassandra really cares about me and maybe just got scared about commitment. I could tell this was a rehearsed speech, probably something they'd all discussed together. I told Lauren I appreciated her concern, but Cassandra had been very clear about not being in love with me anymore. I said I was respecting Cassandra's honesty and trying to be a good friend by not pressuring her to change her feelings. Lauren looked frustrated and said that wasn't what she meant. She said sometimes people say things they don't really mean when they're stressed or confused. I asked Lauren if she thought Cassandra was lying when she said she wasn't in love with me. Lauren didn't have a good answer for that. The conversation with Lauren made me realize that Cassandra's friends are trying to fix something that Cassandra herself said was broken. They're treating this like a temporary relationship hiccup instead of the permanent status change that Cassandra requested. I've been going out more in the evenings. I joined a hiking group that meets on weekends, and I've been hitting the gym consistently. I signed up for a cooking class on Thursday nights, and something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for when I was busy managing our relationship. The cooking class has been amazing, by the way. We're learning French cuisine, and I've already mastered 3 different sauces that I would have never attempted before. It's given me this sense of accomplishment that has nothing to do with anyone else, just me learning something new for myself. Cassandra has been home alone most evenings now. She used to have plans with friends several nights a week, but that seems to have dropped off. I'm not sure if it's because she can't afford to go out as much or if her friends are less available now that she doesn't have a boyfriend to help coordinate group activities. I've noticed she's been ordering delivery food more often, probably because she doesn't want to cook for just herself. The apartment smells like takeout containers most nights when I get home from my activities. I found an apartment I really like. It's a 1-bedroom place about 15 minutes closer to my office with an amazing kitchen and a small balcony. The building has a gym in the basement and a rooftop terrace where residents can hang out. The rent is actually less than what I'm paying now because I won't be splitting a 2-bedroom, which is kind of ironic when you think about it. I haven't signed anything yet because I want to give Cassandra enough notice to figure out her own housing situation. She still hasn't asked me about the lease renewal, even though it's coming up in 6 weeks. I wonder if she's assuming I'll just handle it like I used to handle everything else. Every time I think about bringing it up, I remind myself that roommates don't typically manage each other's housing futures. If she cared about where she'd be living in 2 months, she'd ask. All right, so the situation has escalated significantly since my last update. Cassandra is starting to understand that this isn't some phase I'm going through, and her attempts to fix things have become increasingly desperate. 3 weeks ago, she tried a different approach. She came home from drinks with her friends wearing one of my old college shirts that she used to sleep in when we were dating. She sat on the edge of the bed while I was reading and started crying. She said she missed me and missed what we used to have together. She said she made a mistake and wanted to go back to how things were before. I put my book down and asked her what specifically she missed. She said she missed feeling close to someone and having someone who cared about her. I told her it sounded like she was going through a difficult time and suggested she might benefit from talking to a counselor. I said there are sliding scale therapy options if cost was a concern, or she could try some of the mental health apps that offer affordable counseling. She stared at me like I'd slapped her across the face. She asked if I was seriously recommending therapy instead of talking about our relationship. I said I wasn't qualified to help her work through her feelings about missing physical closeness and emotional connection. A professional would be much better equipped to help her figure out what she really wanted. She got up and left the room without saying anything else. The next morning, she acted like the conversation never happened. But I could tell she was studying my behavior more carefully, like she was trying to find cracks in my roommate approach. The lease situation finally came to a head last week. Our landlord sent the renewal notice, and I left it on the kitchen counter for Cassandra to see. She found it when she got home from a freelance meeting. She asked me if we were going to renew the lease. I told her I had decided not to renew, and that I'd already signed a lease on a different place starting next month. She asked where that left her. I said she'd need to decide whether she wanted to take over this lease by herself or find somewhere else to live. I offered to ask our landlord if he'd be willing to remove my name from the lease if she wanted to stay. That's when she completely lost it. She started screaming that I was abandoning her and leaving her with no way to afford the rent on her own. She said I was being cruel and punishing her for being honest about her feelings. I stayed calm and reminded her that roommates don't typically sign long-term leases together unless they've specifically discussed it and agreed on terms. I said I'd assumed she'd want the freedom to make her own housing decisions as an independent adult. She said I knew she couldn't afford this place on her own and that I was deliberately putting her in an impossible situation. I pointed out that she'd never asked me about my plans for the lease renewal, even though she'd had 6 weeks to bring it up. I said if she'd asked, we could have had this conversation much earlier and she would have had more time to explore her options. She demanded to know why I was doing this to her. She said I was being vindictive and trying to hurt her because she didn't love me the way I wanted her to. I told her I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I said she'd made it clear that she wanted to be friends instead of romantic partners, and I was trying to respect that by not making assumptions about our future living arrangements. She asked what she was supposed to do now. I suggested she could look for roommates or maybe move back in with her parents temporarily while she figured things out. I said her friend Lauren had mentioned she was looking for someone to split rent on a 2-bedroom apartment. She said moving back in with her parents would be humiliating and that Lauren's apartment was in a sketchy neighborhood she didn't want to live in. I said those were definitely challenging options, but that I was confident she'd figure something out. I reminded her that she'd been living independently before we moved in together, so she had experience managing her own housing. She said that was different because she had a steady job then, and that I knew her financial situation was more complicated now. I agreed that her financial situation was more challenging, but said that was exactly why it made sense for her to have more control over her living expenses instead of depending on someone else to make those decisions for her. The conversation ended with her storming out of the apartment. She came back several hours later and didn't speak to me for 3 days straight. During those 3 days, I could hear her on the phone constantly, presumably trying to figure out her living situation. She had several long conversations with her parents that sounded tense based on the tone of her voice coming from her bedroom. She also had what sounded like a difficult conversation with Lauren about the roommate situation. I gathered from the parts I overheard that Lauren's timeline didn't match up with Cassandra's needs. On Thursday, she asked if we could talk. She'd clearly been crying and looked exhausted. She said she'd been thinking about everything and realized she might have been taking me for granted. She said she wanted to work on rebuilding our relationship and earning back my trust. I asked her what she meant by rebuilding our relationship. She said she wanted us to be a couple again. She said she'd been confused before, but now she understood what she really wanted. I asked her what had changed since our conversation 6 weeks ago when she told me she wasn't in love with me. She said she'd been scared of commitment and had convinced herself she didn't have strong feelings for me. She said living as friends had made her realize how much she actually cared about me. I said that was interesting and asked when exactly she'd realized she was in love with me again. She said it had been building over the past few weeks, but it became clear when she thought about me moving out. I said the timing seemed convenient, given that she'd just discovered she couldn't afford to live in our current apartment without me. She got defensive and said money had nothing to do with it. She said she genuinely missed being close to me and wanted to give our relationship another try. I told her I appreciated her honesty, but I wasn't interested in dating her again. She asked why not, and I explained that she'd already told me she wasn't in love with me. I said I believed her when she said that, and I didn't think people's feelings changed that dramatically in just 6 weeks. She insisted her feelings were real and asked what she could do to prove it to me. I said there was nothing she could do because I was no longer in love with her either. That wasn't entirely true when I said it, but it became true while I was saying it. Something shifted in that moment, and I realized I really was done. She started crying again and said I was giving up on us too easily. She said relationships require work and compromise, and that I wasn't even willing to try. I said she was right that relationships require work, but they also require both people to actually want to be in the relationship. I said I no longer wanted to be in a romantic relationship with her. She's been staying at her friend Stephanie's place for the past few days, presumably to give me space to change my mind, but I'm not going to change my mind. I move out next Friday. I've already started packing and hired movers to handle the furniture. Cassandra can keep anything she wants that we bought together. I just want to take my personal belongings and start fresh somewhere new. I moved out 2 weeks ago and wanted to give everyone a final update on how everything ended. Cassandra came back to the apartment the day before I was scheduled to move. She'd been staying with Stephanie for almost a week, and I think she expected to come home and find me still there, surrounded by unpacked boxes, maybe having second thoughts about leaving. Instead, she found most of my stuff already in boxes and the movers scheduled to arrive the next morning. She asked if I was really going through with it. I said yes, I was moving out as planned. She said she'd been talking to Stephanie and Lauren about everything, and they thought we should try couples counseling before making any permanent decisions. I told her I wasn't interested in couples counseling because I didn't consider us a couple anymore. She said she understood I was hurt, but that walking away wasn't the solution. She said we'd built something good together and it was worth fighting for. I asked her what specifically we'd built together that was worth fighting for. She mentioned our shared friend group, our comfortable routine, and how well we worked as a team when we weren't dealing with relationship drama. I pointed out that those things described a good roommate situation, not a romantic relationship. She got frustrated and said I was being deliberately difficult. She said she knew I still had feelings for her and that I was just being stubborn. I asked her what made her think I still had feelings for her. She said she could tell by the way I looked at her sometimes and that nobody changes their behavior as dramatically as I had unless they were trying to protect themselves from getting hurt. I said that was an interesting theory, but that she was wrong. I said the reason my behavior had changed was because my feelings had changed. She asked when exactly I'd stopped loving her. I thought about it for a moment, then told her it was probably the night I realized she'd told her friends about our conversation before she'd even finished having it with me. I said that was when I understood she wasn't actually interested in having an honest conversation with me. She was just looking for validation from her friends about a decision she'd already made. She said that wasn't fair and that she just needed support from her friends during a difficult conversation. I said I understood why she needed support, but the timing showed me that she wasn't really considering my perspective or leaving room for us to work through things together. She'd already decided how the conversation was going to go. She started crying and said she never meant for things to end this way. I said I believed her, but that intentions didn't really matter as much as actions. The movers arrived the next morning at 8. Cassandra stayed in her bedroom while they loaded my furniture in boxes. I'd already moved most of my clothes and personal items to the new apartment over the previous few days, so the actual move was pretty quick. The movers were done in under 3 hours. Before I left, I knocked on her bedroom door to say goodbye, and she didn't answer, but I could hear her crying inside. I stood there for a moment, my hand on the doorknob, and felt absolutely nothing. No urge to comfort her, no guilt, no sadness. Just relief that this chapter was finally closing. I left my key on the kitchen counter next to a note with my new address in case she needed to forward any mail or had questions about the security deposit. My new apartment is fantastic. It's smaller than the place I shared with Cassandra, but everything in it belongs to me and reflects my actual preferences, instead of compromises we made as a couple. I have a reading chair by the window where I drink my morning coffee and watch the sunrise. I bought plants for the balcony, succulents and herbs that I actually take care of myself. I set up my office exactly how I want it, with my gaming setup in one corner and my work desk in another. The walls are decorated with posters and art that I actually like, not the bland, neutral stuff Cassandra insisted on because it was more sophisticated. For the first time in years, my living space feels like mine. I've been dating someone new for about 3 weeks now. Her name is Natalie, and she's a nurse at the hospital downtown. We met at the hiking group I joined a few months ago. She has her own apartment, pays her own bills, and has never once asked me to fix anything for her or handle her errands. The difference is night and day. When Natalie cooks dinner for us, she also cleans up afterward. When we go out, she pays for her own meal unless we specifically agree beforehand that one of us is treating the other. When she says she loves spending time with me, she demonstrates it by planning activities we can do together instead of expecting me to plan everything. She suggested we try rock climbing last week and had already researched gyms and booked us a beginner session. It's been a refreshing reminder of what a balanced relationship actually looks like, where both people contribute equally and nobody's keeping score because everything just naturally evens out. Cassandra texted me last week asking if we could meet for coffee to talk. She said she wanted closure and to apologize for how things ended. I didn't respond to the text. We already had closure the day I moved out. She doesn't need my permission to apologize, and I don't need to hear her apology to move on with my life. From what I understand through mutual friends, she ended up moving back in with her parents. She's still doing freelance graphic design work, but she's also looking for a full-time job with benefits and a steady salary. The reality of adult life without someone subsidizing everything has apparently been a harsh wake-up call. Lauren mentioned that Cassandra has been asking about me and wondering if I'm happy in my new place. Lauren asked if I'd be open to talking to Cassandra if she reached out. I told Lauren that Cassandra was welcome to reach out if she had something specific she needed to discuss, like forwarding mail or splitting the security deposit, but that I wasn't interested in rekindling our friendship or relationship. Lauren said Cassandra was having a hard time adjusting to living with her parents again, and that she felt like she'd lost her best friend along with her boyfriend. I said that was unfortunate, but that it was a natural consequence of the choices Cassandra made. I said I hoped she'd figure things out and find happiness, but that I wasn't the right person to help her with that process. Lauren seemed disappointed with my response, like she'd expected me to cave and agree to meet with Cassandra, but I've learned that other people's expectations aren't my responsibility. Some people might think I handled this situation too harshly, but I think Cassandra needed to learn that relationships have real consequences and that you can't expect people to wait around indefinitely while you figure out what you want. She told me she wasn't in love with me, so I stopped acting like someone who was in love with her. She wanted the benefits of having a devoted boyfriend without the obligation of being a devoted girlfriend. When I stopped providing those benefits, she realized what she was giving up. But by then I'd realized what I was giving up too. I was giving up my time, energy, and money to someone who didn't appreciate any of it enough to love me back. I was settling for a relationship where I cared more than she did and where I was responsible for making everything work while she just enjoyed the results. I'm not angry with Cassandra anymore. I think she's a decent person who made some selfish choices without fully thinking through the implications, but I also don't miss her or wish things had worked out differently. I'm much happier now with someone who actually wants to be with me rather than someone who just likes the lifestyle I can provide. That's where my story ends. I learned that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to take people at their word when they tell you they don't love you, and then act accordingly. I learned that you can't make someone appreciate you by doing more for them. And I learned that walking away from someone who doesn't value you isn't cruel, it's necessary. Life's too short to spend it with someone who sees you as a convenience rather than a partner. 6 months have passed since I moved out, and I wanted to share one final update because some wild stuff has happened. Natalie and I are still together and things are going great. We moved in together last month, but this time it's completely different. We split everything 50-50, we both contribute equally to household tasks, and we make decisions together as actual partners. We have a shared spreadsheet for expenses and we alternate who pays for date nights. It's shown me what I was missing with Cassandra, and honestly, I'm grateful things ended when they did. I dodged a bullet and I know that now. As for Cassandra, I heard through the grapevine that she eventually found a full-time position at a marketing agency. She's apparently doing well professionally and has her own apartment now with a roommate she found online. From what I've heard, she's been in therapy working through some of her issues with independence and relationships. I'm genuinely happy for her that she's getting her life together. Sometimes people need to hit rock bottom before they can start building themselves back up. And maybe that's what happened with her. We ran into each other at a coffee shop 2 weeks ago, completely by accident. It was the first time I'd seen her since moving out. She looked different, more put together somehow, like she'd been taking better care of herself. Her hair was shorter and she was dressed more professionally than I remembered. We had a brief, polite conversation. She congratulated me on my company's success, which she'd apparently heard about through mutual friends. I asked how she was doing and she said she was doing better, that she'd learned a lot about herself over the past few months. She mentioned that living with her parents had been humbling, but necessary, and that having to rebuild her life from scratch had taught her things she should have learned years ago. There was an awkward pause, and then she said she wanted to apologize for how everything went down. She said she'd been selfish and hadn't realized what she had until it was gone. She said she understood now that I was right to walk away, and that she didn't blame me for anything. She admitted that she'd been using me as a safety net while taking me for granted, and that she was ashamed of how she'd treated me. I told her I appreciated the apology and that I hoped she was happy. She smiled sadly and said she was working on it, that happiness was something she was learning to create for herself instead of expecting someone else to provide it. We said goodbye and went our separate ways. I don't think we'll ever be friends, but at least there's no more animosity between us. It felt like closing a book I'd already finished reading. Looking back on everything, I realized that whole experience taught me valuable lessons about self-respect and knowing your worth. I learned that you can't force someone to love you, and you shouldn't sacrifice your own happiness trying to make someone else comfortable. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the natural consequences of their choices. And most importantly, I learned that when someone shows you who they are and what they value, you should believe them the first time. My life now is exactly what I want it to be. I have a partner who values me as much as I value her. I have a career I'm proud of. I have my own space that feels like home. And I have peace of mind knowing that I'm not settling for less than I deserve. That's the real ending to this story. Not revenge, not bitterness, just moving forward and building something better. Sometimes the best response to someone not choosing you is to choose yourself instead.